Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have Joe McQuillen on, and he is talking about his book, My Search for Christopher on the Other Side. An incredible story. Thank you for being here and sharing a story.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. So tell us a little bit about the background of this book and what happened with your son.
Well, Christmas, December 15th, they were all home for Christmas break. And after all the 21-year-olds survived New Year's Eve, we breathed a sigh of relief. And for the last weekend, a bunch of the pals, 12 of them, decided to go up to one of their friends, had a lake house.
This is
Parents had
after
a lake
Christmas,
house.
then. This is after
Yeah, right up.
Christmas.
This
Okay.
is now January of 16.
Ah, okay, got it.
And so 12, they were all up there. They went to a local pub. And to be honest with you, Sally and I were kind of relieved that they weren't going to be running around in the city, that they'd be in this bucolic setting and can't get in too much trouble and kicking up their heels, drinking and shooting pool. And then they all came back to the lake house to continue the revelry. And at 3 a.m., four of the boys went outside, Chris and three of his friends, and passed a boathouse. And as 21-year-old will do, they investigated and saw that there was a canoe in there, and even though there were life jackets somewhere in the boathouse, they didn't put them on. And four boys got into a three-man canoe, partially frozen lake, and paddled out, and none of them came back. So at that point, I got a call Sunday morning. We expected Chris to be back. We were going to watch a football game together. And I was checking my texts, and I get a text from the young man whose family owned the lake house and said Chris and three of the friends are missing. So I jumped in the Jeep and headed up north, and halfway up I got a call that it was no longer a search but a recovery, that all four had drowned. Of course, my heart was completely broken. I think I was possibly even in shock at that point, and just doing the things you got to do to get through. And I finished the drive, got up there, waited for the recovery of the bodies. They wouldn't let me see my boy, as Wisconsin has certain laws, but they showed me a picture of the recovered body, and as you know, my heart broke, and I called his mom, and who was just in agony, and she told her son, and our son Will, and Caroline was visiting a friend, and we had to call her and call Krista's godmother and Christopher's godfather and tell them to get back. I needed them to help me with all the arrangements, and at that point in time, I knew I needed to find out where he was. I wasn't willing to accept a world without Christopher, and that started the search.
What was your relationship with Christopher like before and during your life?
We were really tight. We understood each other. He was a bit of a wild kid, but CJ, so was I. I'm 33 years sober. I was wild and a little fancy free, and so we got each other. And same thing. He was just sweet and loving and wild, and he and I just had this great bond. It's been described by a medium as twin flames, that he and I were that close. We could
Oh,
just
wow.
we could just be, and communicate without even talking. So I assumed that if there was anybody that I could connect with on the other side, it would be this kid that he and I were so tight, and 16 years before, I had, on a lark or a spiritual quest or something, sought out a medium, and
Wait,
there was no
16 years before?
prior to this. Yeah, before this, I had
Okay.
just decided, answer some life's questions. I don't know, curiosity. I went and saw a medium, and she, most of it was pretty mundane, and it wasn't a lot. There wasn't a sense of urgency, but
But
when we got
what
to
but
the end,
who were you going to talk to that had passed during that first time that you met?
I had lost siblings. I'm the youngest of 10 kids. I had lost
Mm.
siblings, both my parents. So I really was just kind of checking it out.
Yeah, whoever's out there, come
Yeah,
talk to me.
it was to me, wasn't a lark. It was a little thicker than that, but it certainly wasn't a need. So I went there, and she said to me, you're just as we were about to leave, she said, your dad's here, and he's showing you a caboose and telling you railroad, that you know what that means. Now, up until that time, I thought, okay, we're done. This was enjoyable. I could spend an hour doing something else. But, at that point in time, I realized that there is another place. My dad spent 40 years on the railroad. Every one of the boys in the family in college worked on the railroad.
Oh, wow.
We were a railroad family. I have a railroad lantern on that bookcase behind me. That's who we identified with. We were a blue-collar, railroad, Irish Catholic railroad family. So he told me this, and I just put that in the files in my mind because,
So what
I now.
the comment was? What was it? What did she say when you were
He
walking?
said, your dad is here, and he's showing me a caboose, and he's telling you railroad.
Okay.
So, and the old man, that was typical of the old man. He didn't go into any explanations. He didn't tell me the secrets of life. Iron Joe was just telling me he was there. So, but I think what happened, CJ, is this set me up
Is
for.
this the picture of your dad?
That's Iron Joe. God, one of the
Okay.
most wonderful men in the history of the world. I just adored the old guy.
Yeah.
Sweet as pie, tough as nails,
Yeah.
but sweet. He could never ended a conversation without "I love you."
Oh.
And he's with Chris now. So what I did at that point, CJ, is when Chris, 16 years later, I flash forward and it's like all of a sudden it's like, now I know why this happened. Because I knew there was a place where souls went. I didn't need to, anytime between then and now, I didn't need to connect. But now I did. And it was like, wait a minute, if Dad's somewhere, then then
I
my
see. So when you
Chris
had
is
that
gonna be.
medium that went, the first medium said, "Hey," gave you proof, like you did connect to someone. So
There is
you're
someone,
Iron Joe. So there are some people who can talk to people, and there's some
right?
place that they're going. So you're like, "Wow, I have proof of someplace else."
So when Chris left, when Chris crossed over, I wasn't ready to accept the world without him. And I knew from this experience 15 years before, 16 years before, that it wasn't an accident. That wasn't that I think God was preparing me for something by giving me a glimpse that there is another side. There is a way to go, that I didn't have to accept my son being completely gone. So not long after he drowned, we got home and I got home and we had to wait for the body to be shipped back. We had to do the funeral arrangements and graves and funerals and receptions and all of that stuff. And a couple of days in, I called him, that same medium from 16 years before, who relocated to Tucson or to Surprise, Arizona, in Scottsdale, and I touched base with her. And her name's Nancy Meyer. She's a lovely gal. If you're out in Arizona, look her up. She's wonderful. And she told me exactly what happened during the accident. She told me what happened in the canoe. She said that the boys were out. They'd been drinking, she said, and they were out roughhousing, and the canoe tipped over, and they had unlaced boots. They all had these Timberland boots that they'd wear with laces untied and layered clothing because it was winter. And what happened was that none of them made it. And that she said, look, the death was quick. She said the hypothermia, the alcohol. She said it was like passing out. There was no pain. She said Chris said at first he was a little panicked and surprised by his lungs filling up with water. But then he immediately crossed, and that my niece Carrie was there to greet him. And Chris said to her, Carrie, what are you doing here? Now my niece Carrie died at 42 years old of a brain aneurysm, left two beautiful little boys. And when she died, Christopher at 19 stayed in Buffalo to nanny the kids until they could arrange for childcare, because they're single now. The husband was a single dad now and had to work, so he stayed on as a 19-year-old. And I said, Chris, this is a big responsibility. He said, Dad, that's just what family does, And he stayed for 2 months and wiped their nose and changed their clothes and bathed them and took them to nursery school. But that's the kind of kid that my boy was. So she, as a thank you, greeted him when he crossed over. The first one.
Wow. And then what did he say? I mean, knowing that this was what happened, or is there any part of you that doubts like this isn't exactly what happened, or do you believe that this is exactly what happened? They paddled down?
Yeah, we know certain things. We know that the kids, they were all, drinking, shooting pool, hanging out. A bunch of them went to bed already. And these guys were just
So
not
there are
ready.
more than four of them there.
There were a dozen There were
Oh,
12
oh
kids in
my
the house.
God. Oh my
And,
God.
I mean, I remember when I went and picked out his gravestone, and the guy said, "What were they thinking?" And I looked at him and I said, "What are you talking about? I know exactly what they were thinking. At 21 years old, I would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Hey, look, a canoe.
Let's
What could
go.
go wrong?"
Let's go,
I
man.
mean,
Yeah.
what happened was just a perfect storm with the clothing and
Hmm.
the partially frozen water and alcohol involved, that they all came together, and all four of those boys crossed over that night.
So got this information. I assume that you're still in shock. Like when you found out, like, or how long did you call
I
the
was in
medium?
shock. I was in shock for a good week. I mean, but it was all left foot, right foot. I mean, things had to be done. You don't have the luxury of saying, "Well, I'm just gonna, roll up in a ball and let everything get taken care of." That's your job. That's my job. The rest of the family, we were all grieving and doing our thing, but I had to get all these arrangements. And Sally was doing all kinds of stuff, and we were all putting this stuff together. So it was only a few days later that I called her and I said, "I don't know if this is premature. I'm not sure of the rules. And to be honest with you, I had no idea, what the rules are."
And what did
And
she say were the roles? Yeah, what'd she
she said
say?
to me, "I am so shocked that somebody that crossed over that quickly, that soon, was able to communicate and come through." She said, "I can only assume he was a very old soul to be able to do that, because that's not usual. That's not, I mean, here, it's funny you ask about the rules. I'm sitting here with a book called, Idiot's Guide to Communication.
Joe.
So I had no idea. You may as well ask me about astrophysics. I don't know anything about this other than an encounter 16 years ago where I believed my dad came through and gave me a message. So I wanted to know more. So that's what started this journey. And I'm still new at this. It's 3 years, 3 months. It's not that long ago. So, I'm taking in everything I can to try to connect and stay close to my son.
And
The
what was
bottom
your
line is,
family's reaction? So you came back, you told them, and in some ways, like my dad died of a heart attack. I don't really
right.
know what happened. It's just like he died. He was up early in the morning, died of a heart attack. Is gone. And I had a friend whose dad was driving on the highway. A drunk driver came and torpedoed into their
Yeah.
car the other direction. And there is this, I'm not sure why, but there is this fascination, or desire to want to know. Like she said, take me to the car accident now. And I was like, are you sure? Are you sure you want
Yeah.
to see this scene? And there's like glass. I mean, it was like, because we were there, like maybe,
Right.
I mean, to the point where the ambulances were still there and we could see the car, we could see I mean, it was just devastatingly bad. Um, but
CJ, I can
yeah,
close my eyes right now and look, standing at that lake house, looking at the lake with the boats with lights and the police lights while they were trying to recover my son. So, what exactly happened? The truth of the matter is, it doesn't really matter. We know that four really good pals, good guys, went out with, a little overserved and under the weather, and something happened to cause. It was obviously, it's not a suicide. Four guys don't make a suicide pact in cold
no,
weather.
yeah, of course,
It
yeah.
wasn't. It was not. There was no malice. It was just a dumb accident that caused it. Now I will tell you, a year later, I'm a mortgage broker. Not, writing the book is not going to feed the family. Trust me on this. But and had gone out and seen a client in the far western suburbs, in northern suburbs, and so I just kept driving it was middle of winter, and I drove to the lake house where Chris had drowned,
Mm,
and I knew the family. It's a lake house, so they'd be in their residence here in the North Shore, so I just went and walked down to the lake. I will tell you something crazy, and I got to tell you, 3 years have been amazing and a lot of crazy things. I walked down in this snow in Wisconsin, and I'm in a suit, and I'm down in Coal-on shoes and wool pants, and I walked on the lake, and I just said a prayer, and I thought about my boy, and I knew he was with me, and I made it back to the car, and I assumed, well, it's going to be a little uncomfortable driving back home because my pant legs are going to be drenched, my shoes will be ruined. My pants were dry and my shoes weren't saturated. I walked through the snow, and it was untouched. It wasn't like I was following a path because nobody had been up there in months, and my nothing was wet or uncomfortable. So I just laughed. And by this point, I'd had enough of those kind of coincidences, which to me is just God showing off. That I just accepted it and said, "Huh, ain't that something?"
That there's more. So when you had those incidents, I had several of those incidents as well. Like when my dad passed, there's in my husband in my room there would be a light that would just turn on in the middle of the night, and we're like, seriously, what is wrong with this light? So we unplugged it.
Yeah.
And the next night, the light went back on.
It was back on.
And I was like, seriously, what's going on? So these kinds of scenarios.
And I think that's the thing that people, until one message is wake up, people. These signs are everywhere. Look around. What's the line from Hamlet? There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So I laugh because I quote Rumi all the time. Goodbyes are for those who love with their eyes. For those who love with their heart and soul, there's no such thing as separation. And then people talk to me about, was your book having something to do with New Age? And I thought, yeah, and stuff from the 13th century. So none of this is New Age.
Right.
We're just coming to age of this. We're just growing and evolving, and the veil keeps getting thinner. Mm-hmm. Now, as you said before we even talked, I couldn't imagine having this conversation 3.5 years ago. But now I know, by the way, this is a knowing. I know this is real. I know there's the other side. I know he's there. I know a lot of other people are there. A bunch of them come through with me. And, my sister, who was his godmother and one of my favorite people on the planet, was there and he greeted her along with my brother Jerry, Billy, and Bobby. I know for a fact because I'm told these names by people that, good luck looking up Bobby McQuillen. He died in 1977, right?
So a medium actually told you that these are the folks that were greeting, and then you're like, oh my God, that's my Uncle Bobby. Which she wouldn't have been able to look. Yeah, she would have been able to look up on the internet and be like, oh.
How about this? Thomas John, we were in a group of 100 people in Highland Park. And at the last minute, I got an email, the Thomas John's appearing there. They go, huh.
Who's Thomas John?
Thomas John is this great medium. Mm-hmm. He's called the Manhattan Medium. And so we said, oh, great, let's go see Thomas John. And Chris had come through in other settings, I'll go see a medium. And I just saw John Holland, who was amazing. And he came through, and Chris came through there. Chris has never come through. He's not come through one time. And I think he just didn't like the medium. So I got to be honest. So here's what Thomas John, you'll crack up.
Yeah, tell me what Thomas John said.
So Thomas John, Sally and I were sitting, you got to understand, Sally's from this nice family, all American, white bread, sweet as pie, followed the rules. We were hooligans, we were 10 kids and the neighbors hated us. They just hated us, nobody ever told on us because nobody talked to our parents because they hated us. So Thomas is going on in the first half, and this guy, for an hour and a half, he just read 100. He just kept going. And he was nailing people and accurate and telling. He told this one woman about her bridesmaid who had died of an overdose. He thought it was suicide. She said, no, it's an overdose. Talked about the dress, talked about the trip to Las Vegas. I mean, you can't look this stuff up.
Wow.
Right? And these people are putting up their hands saying, yeah, that's me. So he hadn't come through. And Sally and I were on the other side of the room. And we're in the front row. We were on the other side of the room. And he said, there's this family and members keep showing up. And Thomas John said, frankly, they kind of scare me. Now, he was kidding. Mediums don't get scared. But finally he said, we need to address this family. And he said, okay, who's got an older brother named Jeremiah who crossed? And I raised my hand. And he said, okay, Billy? And I said, yeah, Billy's there too. He said, and who's the brother that took his life when he was, in the 70s? And I said, that was Bobby. He said, yeah, Bobby's here. And he said, and then your older sister just crossed over a year and a half ago. That's Patty, right? I said, yeah. He goes, okay.
I'm getting chills. Oh my God.
I know. This will go in the second book because this was after the first book.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, there's this, and now there's somebody who's a son or a son figure. Was that your son? I said, yeah. He goes, Oh, he's behind Patty, throwing up bunny ears behind her head. And we always screwed with my oldest sister, Patty. And I said, yeah, that's Chris. He named 5 family members by name. And
Wow.
one, what year he died, the year that he died early, and he took his life, and he identified that. And he said, and then how about this? He said, okay. He said, now the other ones just want you to know they're happy, they love you, it's good. Tell their family that they're good. And he said, now Jerry's handing it over to Chris. And then he said, Chris is bringing forward a kid. And he said, Joe, we're done. And now, by the way, he said to Sally, my wife is Sally, and sit next to me. He goes, who's Sally? And I pointed to Sally. He said, no. Sally, 100 years old. Well, that was her grandmother who passed at 100 years old. He said,
Wow.
just want you to know that she's looking out for you. That was the entire message. How wonderful. Then he said, Chris is bringing forward a boy named Josh. And Josh is a shy boy, and the shy boy, and his not mom's name's, Marcia. He said, who's that? And a woman raised her hand. He goes, all right, look, your boy's shy, and he wasn't going to come through, and Chris brought him forward. And he's got his arm around him, bringing him forward. He said, Chris is going back, but Marcia, you should thank Chris because he brought Josh for you. And then they had their dialogue. So that's the stuff that you can say, gee, it's a fix. Come on, there's 100 people. I'm not famous. He doesn't know me, and he certainly doesn't know my family.
And all the names and your Sally and like what's the likelihood? Because I've had so many friends. I took a class with James Van Prague, who's a famous reading.
Amazing.
Yeah, she's really accurate. And I kept on sitting through each time going, please call on me, please. And my dad never showed up. And I was like, why aren't you showing up? But maybe he didn't like him. I don't know. Or I'm not sure because a long time had passed. But I always like, why aren't you showing up? But they were super accurate. But my girlfriends were so skeptical. It's like, oh, don't you think they just look up all that stuff on the internet? And they say generic things like, you have a loved one that's passed or you really miss them. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I saw James Van Prague, and I'm a pretty skeptical person, and I'm kind of questioning. So how many mediums have you seen since Chris's death 3 years ago?
Maybe 10. 10.
Okay.
And one was a lovely gal who just wasn't very good at her craft. You got to understand that I think mediums, or I know mediums are like chefs or relief pitchers. There's good ones. There's great ones. Some of them are perfecting their craft and getting better. Some of them, like Van Prague, John Holland, are just outrageous. They're just so accurate, So somebody sees mediums they didn't remember. Nancy in 2000, I went through 40 minutes of blasé stuff until she got to my dad. And it was one hit. If I would have left early, I would have walked away thinking this is BS. Or not for me. Yet I got the one hit that prepared me for 16 years later when I needed it. And I think that's a loving God. I got to tell you, when, people also say, there's a radio interview, and he's a good guy named Mancow, and he thinks all of this is the devil's work. He's kind of like a shock jock. And I have to laugh. I said, for 3 years I've been getting messages from Chris. It's all about love, healing, be a better guy, help people. You need to help people, Dad. You need to help other fathers who've lost kids, right? It's hard to find the negative message in that one, right? It really is. So here's my story where I know it connects to God. The first 3 nights that Christopher had crossed over, I went to bed. And fortunately, the days are so full of activities and that I would just get to bed. And actually, I got a prescription for some Ambien, which I took just during that time, but just to conk out, right?
Yeah, it's just the nerves there are tremendous. You need to do something,
Right. And so I'd get on my knees, which I do every night, and I thank God for keeping me sober. I've been sober 33 years now, and I thank God for my family. But I would say, look, but you got to understand, I'm PO'd at you. You took my kid. And I did that for, I wanted to know that I still acknowledged him as God, but he and I were not on the best of terms at this point.
You're on my list.
You're on the list. On the 4th night, I did my little prayer, went to bed, and I got a message that said, I didn't take your son. It's like, it's literally in my head. He said, your son's recklessness and free will caused him to cross early. I welcomed him home, and I'm glad he's here, but I didn't take him. Then he said, wow. Remember, I lost a son too. So at that point, I knew that God wasn't some chess master moving us around. Yeah. But he was grieving, holding me while I grieved. We have free will. God didn't pull a lever to yank my son from my past sins. My son's recklessness caused him to come home early, and
Well, that's a
so at that
huge
point in
thing,
time,
actually, because I think, because here's what I've heard. I talk to tons of people who are
yeah,
mediums, talking to whomever, talk about soul contracts and all this, and even James on Prague wrote a book that you've probably read about when children pass early or something
yeah,
like that, and like how can you grieve a child that's taken by cancer at age 5, like or a new, like there's so many, like I think a child's death is one of the hardest
it
ones to
is.
cope with, and the one that I can't, like if I even think about my children passing, like
Right.
I would go up, I would just lose everything,
Yeah.
but but generally the story is, oh well, they had a soul contract that said that they were here, they're going to die at an early age so that to teach someone a lesson or so someone that they love can learn something about something or other, right? I've heard those kind of messages, but that's the first time I've ever heard, like, I didn't take your child.
Right.
That's the first
It,
time I've ever heard that, and I think that
yeah.
that's really
Rebecca,
interesting.
Rebecca Rosen told us, and she's amazing. We saw her. She came up in a group
Is
of
she a
once on her,
medium?
like well known
Okay, sorry.
in
I don't know. I don't know.
Denver or
Yeah.
the West Coast.
Okay.
Rebecca Rosen. She's like one of those. She's like a Van Prague as far
Right.
as highliners, right? She's
Yeah.
and she came up and said to me, she talked about a tattoo. She talked about a song, "To Live Like You Were Dying," that we do as a group. We have a band that plays at his golf outing, and that's the core song, right? That's what keeps
Mm.
us all together. And and she told about a dog that and she named the breed, the dog,
Wow.
a Japanese chin dog, right? It was like amazing. But she said, look, he had a soul contract that was going to expire the next year.
Wow.
So I
Well, I
guess,
just got
so she
chills
said,
again.
yeah,
Wow.
he was going early, but his free will, recklessness caused him to just leave a little earlier,
Wait, so she
So
said the same thing?
yeah, I think soul contracts do exist, but I think you can leave earlier if events caused it. I don't.
Yeah.
God doesn't cause train wrecks. I don't think he causes cancers in kids. We do. We're the ones who put stuff in our soy and our meal and our corn or whatever. We're the one who put drugs in our system that we don't know what's going to happen 10 years later. It's hard to blame God for that. I remember one time I was had a conversation and somebody said something about how can you believe in God when children go to bed hungry every night? And the best response I'd ever heard was, there's enough food in this earth to feed everybody 3 times over. God's in manufacturing, not distribution. He makes enough food for all of us. What
Wow.
we do as selfish people that cause others harm, that's our problem. That's our fault.
So you were raised an Irish Catholic.
Yeah.
Now, which I know that there are a whole bunch of beliefs probably about mediums, about death, about God. How have those changed or evolved over the last 3 years?
None at all. I will tell you, I was never a devout Catholic. I'm a huge fan of Christ. I think he's the favorite son. I do. I think he's great.
I
One of
just
my
think a
favorite
huge
stories.
fan of Christ, like he's a basketball player.
Well, he is.
I pick him
He
on the
go,
first draft. He's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. I take in my fantasy God draft. I take my divinity draft. I take him.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll take Buddha second. I was never a devout Catholic, but I believe in Christianity. I think we've screwed it up pretty good. One of my favorite stories of Christ is when he walked into the temple and there were, the equivalent of a currency exchange and selling, trinkets and baubles and things to sacrifice. And he went crazy. Christ got PO'd, started tipping over tables and kicking some butt. Now, that's what I love about the duality of him. He is a God, but he's a man. And his manliness took over at that point, and he lost his stuff, And that brings me closer to this God. And if you really read, as a Catholic, the funny thing, we were never encouraged to read the New Testament or any of the Bible. That the priest will tell you what to believe. But if you read the New Testament and the Old Testament, there's predictions and seers in there, the whole thing. There's one line where it says, where Christ says, he said, you will see me and then you won't, then I'll be gone. Well, and then, or I'll come back and then you won't see me again. And that's in Matthew. And he's referring to him coming back for 40 days and disappearing. So what I'm talking about is the spiritual highway that Christianity was built on. We believe in the communion of saints. That what does that mean? That means they're all over there. Do you think only the saints graduate to heaven? I think it's just the interpretation of what heaven is. And I've been fortunate enough. I've got some glimpse of it. Chris has told me about it. I dig it. It's like, I'm in no hurry. CJ, I am in no hurry to go. I've got a lot of work to do still. We got to get this book out there to help people. I've got kids to still raise. But I've had this life beyond my wildest dreams. And if God touched me on the shoulder and said, hey, sport, time to go, I'm good. Because I know the next deal not only is better, but I get to spend it with the son that I adore, that I lost. Oh. So, and another thing that's important is that you were talking about losing kids. And Chris was 21. So people would come up to me and say, I'm so sorry for you. I'm so sorry for you. And at one point I said to a group, don't feel sorry for me. I got to be his dad on this earth for 21 years. I have 21 years of memories. You didn't get to be his dad. I feel sorry for you.
Yeah,
and I get to be his dad on the other side when this round is done.
I don't know why I was thinking of this, but when I kept on thinking about and getting prepared for the interview, I thought of that young man in North Carolina that tackled. And each time I hear that story, I can just think of that story and it brings me to tears that seriously, someone would he's a goalie and his mission was to protect and defend. And but for some reason I keep on thinking about Chris with that. I have no idea why.
Because he does. And you wouldn't believe the amount of emails and things and letters and some great stuff has been done in his name. We do this in Balance Ranch Academy. We do a scholarship, and it's a high school for boys between 14 and 18 with addiction problems, and it's on a ranch where they work. And Chris went there for a year and then stayed on as a life coach, and they adored him. They just built a ranch house, which is bunkhouse, and they call it McQuillen Manor after him. There were 2,000 people at his wake. Every year at his grave.
Wow.
It started out as an impromptu celebration on the anniversary of his crossing. I showed up, and all of a sudden cars kept coming. And it was all his friends from college, from town. We had 40 people. Last year, even though most of these kids have graduated and have jobs, we still had 35 people at his grave. Wow. At 5-degree weather in January in Illinois, right? And so that tells you this, and the letters we've gotten about how one woman, was just coming out of the closet. She was gay, and she just felt ostracized, and they were at a party, and Chris took her aside and hugged her. It said, we love you, not your sexuality.
Oh, my God. Wow. This is
That's
really
the kind of kid
kid.
That's the kind of kid. He is a special kid. And then you combine that with wild, funny, sweet, he was one of a kind, that one.
So I can see how 20 years with someone like that kind of special. I mean, going out at age 19 to be with his cousin, just sounds like a phenomenal person. So tell me a little bit about the channeling that happened for you, because I thought, I was reading, I'm like, candle and sage, what is happening? And then you're channeling. I was just about pretty much fell off the floor.
I was like, wait a minute, the same guy that plays hockey on Sunday night sitting down and channeling at 3:00 in the morning.
That so what happened? Shocked me.
I would get up in the middle of the night, and I'm 62, so getting up in the middle of the night is not that unusual. But I get up and I'd go into my office, which is what you're looking at here, and this was Christopher's bedroom. So his spirit moves freely here. So I would go there, light a candle, align my chakra, and just meditate.
Align your chakras. Okay, that's new.
I do. I know. You know what? I was here. I'll tell you. I was up in Arizona, and at the vortexes. And, I came back with an Indian. I had a guide that was taking me around. and
You're talking about Sedona,
Yatta,
Arizona, that has these
yeah,
incredible
Sedona.
vortexes
Right.
and energy.
I
Yeah.
was out there for 5 hours on this tour, and I came back and was greeted a group, and I said, Yatta hey. And it was like, oh my God, he's gone completely off the reservation. They lost this one. Yeah. So, I mean, by the way, I know how to get things done. Always have. You need to get into a restaurant and it's, full. We'll have a seat. Trust
Right.
me. You want ball game tickets? I'll get it handled. I've always been. So I've took the same concept to this. What do I do to facilitate this? How can I get closer? How can I connect with my son? There's nothing more important to me. So you gotta find the rules, find the angles. If it's sage and a 2-wick candle, God bless, run with it. Now I tried after reading Bron von Prague book. I tried to do mirror gazing and it freaked me out and threw it out. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah, so you had like all these different tools and you're kind of like, yes, no, yes, no, yes.
Yeah.
So far, sage and candles are like, yes.
Yeah, sage and candles. This one freaked me out a little bit, so I just said, I'm done. Another thing I tried to do, I went and bought, and he laughed at me later on in a reading. I went and bought a recorder. So the voice, phenomenon, VPN. And I, put it at his grave to see if I can voice. And it was like, yeah, wrong guy. He told the medium, that's a little showy for me. It's like, okay. So if you know anybody that needs a nice recorder, I've got one sitting on my desk, pretty much unused. So
you've tried virtually everything. And
most of them work.
Yeah.
Most of them are tried and true. The reason that people represent them, the reason they're in books like that one is because they work for them. So when people tell me, gee, I've been trying to reach my sister, Samantha, and I haven't heard from her, I say, try harder. You're not trying hard enough. Try harder. What are you going to do to make the deal work for you? So 3 o'clock in the morning, and this is a great story. So January 3rd, 3 o'clock in the morning, 2017. So it's the first year anniversary of his crossing. And I'm sitting in his bedroom and I do all the meditation stuff. And I'm trying to just feel him, and I do feel him. And all of a sudden, I started getting messages. And there was a pen and a legal pad on my desk. And I started writing. And at first, I got to tell you, I got almost all the way through the book and I called it automatic writing.
Wow.
Until I realized it wasn't. Automatic writing is where you're in a trance. You're writing somebody else's handwriting. You don't know what you're saying. That wasn't this. This was messages that I'm writing down, but I knew they weren't for me. And I'm going to tell you why I knew they weren't for me. One of the first messages he said to me is he said, he described what the other side's like. He said, it's beautiful. It's green and blues. He said, it's lovely. It's like a beach at night. He said, it's always warm. There's a breeze, but it's never cold. He's describing stuff. And I'm like, sign me up. This is good. And then he said to me, you got to forgive Scotty. He was just being him.
Who's Scotty?
And he said, I love Scotty and Scotty loved me. Scotty was the kid whose parents owned the beach house, the lake house. So, I couldn't be mad at God. He took that off the table. So I had to be mad at somebody, right? I'm Irish. You got to run around with a grudge for somebody. You know what Irish Alzheimer's is, CJ? Where you forget everything but the grudges. So we have a long history of holding grudges.
Okay.
So, so I'm still mad about the English in Northern Ireland, but we'll get to that another time. So I'm getting these messages. Now you got to understand, I wasn't ready to let go of that resentment. I was nurturing that. And he said, you got to let go of that. And I said, okay, Chris, for you, I'll do it. No worries. And I'm thinking, angle shot here. Besides, when will I see Scotty again?
Right.
Fast forward 12 hours at the grave, the first anniversary. Like I told you, 40 kids showed up, and one of them was Scotty. Broken-hearted, crying. It wasn't his fault. Could have been anybody's house, right?
Oh, my God. Oh.
And so Chris was not only guiding me, he was preparing me for something that was going to happen that he knew 12 hours in advance. And he needed me to be ready for that. So I wasn't shocked or thrown off. I embraced the kid and told him I loved him. And so he also said at first, he said, you were my rock, Dad. He said, now I know that embarrasses you, but just write it down. These are things I wouldn't say. That's how I knew it wasn't me trying to put a salve on my grief. Right? It wasn't me trying to put a bandage on this. It was him giving me messages and giving me guidance. And we still do it. 2 or 3 times a month, I still get up at 3 a.m., come in and write messages that he gives me.
Can you actually, it's on page 72 of your book. Do you have it? Would you
Yeah.
actually read some of it just so people know what a channeled writing sounds like? Because it's kind of like, what? What does that mean? So this is you
Okay.
sitting down with your sage and your candle, and on page 72, you're describing. I don't know. You may want to pick the passage that you like, but
Right. It's it's like a beach, beautiful and pink, warm, but the colors are soft and vibrant, pink, blues, and strong green. The air is warm surrounding us. It's air, love. It's love air everywhere. Nothing hurts. Warm and happy, always young. Miss you, Dad, but I'll see you soon enough. Be nicer to Mom. Try to understand she feels alone. You don't. You know I'm here, and you feel me. She's not sure. And by the way, that changed significantly in the coming year, where Sally completely embraced this. But those were the guidance and messages. None of that was from me. He later on in one of the passages, he says to me, life should be like a canoe cutting through water. Now, do you think I would ever use that analogy in my
no.
life? Never.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when those are the things, and another thing he said, I know it scares you, Dad, to feel this close to the other side. And it doesn't scare me at all. So the kind of thing is, these guys aren't omnipresent. They're just spirits in the other room, right? So it's not like they have all the answers. So he was wrong. So what told me was, how validating is he being wrong about my feelings? Because that says it didn't generate from me. If it's generating from me, I would have been right about my feelings.
Okay, got it. So like when you're reading this, you're like, I don't feel that way. And then you're like, so then when he said that, you're like, wait a second. Okay, I do feel that way, or how did you respond?
No, it really was. It was like, I don't feel that way. He was just wrong. So that's validating to me that I now could say this didn't come from me, or I wouldn't have said it. I wouldn't have said something that I know is not right. He said to me, we get a kick out of you over here. And I'm thinking, who's we? Who are we?
Who is we? Did you ask him? Who is we?
You know what? I rarely ask him questions except with mediums. I'm really just dictating when he's coming to me and visiting. I feel him. I smell him. I haven't been able to see him. I'm working on it. I'm trying real hard. I go to his grave all the time. And you got to understand, it's not like some poor old guy feeding pigeons in the park, right? I go to his grave. And Thomas John, this other medium that I referenced before, I went and saw him in person. And he said to me, you go to his grave a lot, don't you? And I said, yeah. He said, when were you there last? And I said, yesterday. He said, yeah. He said, normally when parents go to people's grave, I tell them not to, that they're not there. But I'm telling you to keep going, that you and Chris communicate real well there. That's a great spot for you guys. So I go to his grave. I have a folding chair, like, one of those cloth folding chairs with Buffalo Bills logo. I light a cigar and we talk. And I try to see him, and I envision him as when I would pick him up from coming from out of town, when I'd meet him at the airport and he'd come through the glass security gate. And I'd always there was one time I was late and he was like, hey, dude, you were late. It was like I was always there waiting for him, basically because I couldn't wait to see him. And that's still how I feel. Yeah. So when I try to envision him, I'll go to the grave and I'll look into the bushes and I'll envision him walking through those glass security gates to see his old man.
Okay, what is that noise that keeps on vibrating? Is that him?
I don't know. I thought it was you. Maybe it's him.
That must be him, because I'm like, it feels like you keep on hitting a spring, and then I hear
yeah. My hands isn't anywhere near the microphone.
I kept on thinking, what is Joe doing?
I'm nowhere near the microphone.
Oh,
I'm over here.
Must be Chris saying hi.
Hi, buddy.
Okay, I just had to ask. All right, so I want to ask a little bit about your family, because you had a daughter, a son. You still have a daughter and son, and your wife, Sally. So when I know that even just when my son empty nesting left, it was just such a huge change in our lives. So how did each of you deal with the loss of your son, brother?
That's a great question, and I will tell you that is their stories. But I'll tell you, we handled it differently, and we grieved separately. And, we adored each other and we were in horrible pain. My daughter and I similarly would fill our days with as much activity as we could so that we could just not think. And Sally and William both just shut down, and regrouped. So it was totally separate. Sally's writing her own book not about the metaphysical, but mostly just about, she communicates with him all the time too, but mostly about just the experiences that she has, and she's writing a book to him, and it's going to be beautiful. She's letting me read the first chapter, and it was painful, and I cried my eyes out. And William has seen mediums. Caroline is a little more closed off. William's open, and I think they know that he's around them. Sally feels him all the time because he adored his mama, and he sends her signs all the time. I don't know why I was given this gift to actually be able to connect with him. I think it was that he wanted to connect with somebody, and he and I were just that close, and he knew I would get it. He knew his dad's wacky enough that he'll get this, and it's true,
Wow. Yeah. So, you had said that you have a different sense of why we're all here. You said we grow spiritually or we die. So is that the gift? I mean, what is the gift of, what do you think it's been the gift of his passing, as hard as it is?
Well, I will tell you this, and I've gotten these are miracles that I've been privy to receive. I've been just gracious, right? Now, I would give it all up for one, hey, Dad, let's order a pizza. Let's go to a ball game. Let's hit some golf balls, right? I mean, I would rather be blissfully ignorant than be as insightful as I am now, right? So the gift, there's a reason. I'm on a bit of a crusade, and it really is just to tell people specifically. I never cared. We had 10 kids, as I said. I never cared what anybody thought. It was never on my horizon. If people don't like what I'm writing about, I don't care. I had somebody on a radio interview said, what do you tell people who said they just don't buy it? I say, change the station. Listen to sports radio. I don't care. But if you've lost somebody and you want to connect and you want to know they're there, I'm your guy. That they're still right here. Susan Geisman wrote this great book called Still Right Here, and Wolf's Message. She wrote some beautiful, and we've communicated back and forth a little bit, her and I. And she's an all-star in this stuff too, right? And so that's it. That, he would dog me on during this when I felt like just shutting down and watching Law and Order. He'd say, you need to get going. You need to help people. You need to finish the book. And I'd go to a medium. This Andrew Anderson's a good buddy. He's turned into a buddy, and he's a medium. And Andrew would say, Chris said he wants you to finish the book. I said, tell him I'm trying. I'm doing it. I'm working as fast as I can. But it was important for him because I'm supposed to carry a message. And the reason is I'm a great ambassador. I don't look like a flake. You know what I mean? I don't look like I was a car dealer for 25 years. You're not going to pull a fast one on me. If this is BS, I'd know it. I'd have known it a long time ago. Right. I know what hustlers and frauds look like.
Right.
And I can smell them. Right. And all I can tell you is because I'm that kind of, I don't know, boots on the ground and hard-nosed guy, that Christopher's giving me this message so I can help people and change their heart. You lost a kid. I mean, there's every day, to be honest with you, I had to run in the city and drive back, too fast. But I was listening to the book I listen to books that I download all the time. I was listening to this book just prepared for this interview, listen to my messages from my boy. And I start bawling my eyes out, and the truth of the matter is, I don't care. You know what I mean? If I have a little mini breakdown every day, that's just my deal. That's how I process this, and I got to tell other dads that it's okay. For some reason, women feel it's okay to do that. Get together, process, share the burden. Guys think they're supposed to, suck it up, buttercup, that they're supposed to just get on with life. And if you lost a kid, your heart's broken, don't just get on with life, figure it out, connect with them. And they want to talk to us. They're dying to talk to us. Open the door, man. Take a shot.
I just see everyone clapping. I see Iron Joe clapping.
Iron Joe. I love the old man. The old man.
I love this guy. Just keep on hearing him like, yes.
Yeah.
This is, because it seemed like he was such a sweet man, but tough as nails too, right? Just like you.
He worked 16 hours a day. He raised 10 kids, 5 that were cousins. He just took them in. And then mom too, but I always give the old man credit. Just took them in, and that was it. Nothing to talk about. No adoption, no papers, no state aid. They're just our kids. Move on. And if
Sweet.
anybody had a problem with that, that was their issue. And I'm told that he's around all the time, but he takes a step back, that he's with my son all the time, but he takes a step back because he knows my need to talk to Chris.
Yeah, very
And he's
sweet.
actually come through and said to me, I wish our relationship was like yours and Chris was, because you were more like friends.
Yeah, very sweet. We've
Yeah.
been talking to Joe McQuillen about his book, My Search for Christopher on the Other Side. Thank you. What a tremendous story. Thank you for sharing your heart.
And it's available
opening.
at Amazon.com in Audible and Kindle
Are you reading the book? Is it your voice?
No, and the guy who did it, thank God, because I do download. I'm Audible, so I listen to books in the car all the
Yeah.
time because I move around a lot in the car, seeing clients and such, and I'm always listening to books. Some spiritual stuff, some spy novels, right? I
Yeah.
always listen to books, and so I was really nervous about because I know that I tell a story, and the book is just me telling a story, but the Audible is so important that I was nervous. I had no, Lisa Hagen, who's my publisher, was wonderful, and she had set it up. And when I listened to it, the guy's voice was wonderful. The inflections were phenomenal. The nuances were perfect. I was so grateful that it was somebody that I was comfortable with.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to get it on Audible. Thank you so much for being
You're
here.
welcome. Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.